The only thing that stressed me out at that time was knowing that if I was to die, I wouldn't have been happy with the mark I left on my life.
Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Carling.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Happy Bride.
Happy Pride. Happy Calgary Pride.
I can't believe I just glazed over it when
I
making our
know.
recording schedule, and I should be at the Pride Parade, but instead we're interviewing 3 people today.
I know. It came out of nowhere, I feel.
Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't aware of it, wasn't ready for it,
Yeah.
but your oldest kiddo is there, which is so great.
Yeah, my oldest kid is there with their big brother. I feel like whenever I say big brother, they're going to be like, what? You have another kid? It's from Big
Like the
Brothers Big Sisters. So their big brother is super supportive, and they left this morning and they were actually in the parade. So I think they're
I
having
will
fun.
tell you, I don't like to go to parades, but put me in a parade and I have the time of my life.
Yeah, I hate parades. I hate going to parades. I don't know. Something about the sound of the marching band, like the bass of the marching band, like it's too much for me to handle. Like it really, I don't know, it like overstimulates me. And I remember going to a couple parades with my kids. And I'm like, why don't you just stand at the edge of the driveway and I'll walk back and forth and throw candy at you? That's pretty much like all we need. So,
When I watch a parade, like, I don't wanna make eye contact with anybody in the
right.
parade, and I feel, like, a bit embarrassed to just be staring at them, but that's the point of the parade,
Yeah.
and I don't like people pushing and shoving to get in,
No, no. And then there's
and
always going to be like one kid who grabs all the candy or like,
oh,
yeah, I'm not a fan of parades, but
yeah,
I've
we
been
don't
in a
have to
couple
all,
parades.
like
I've been in a couple parades.
it's way more fun because you get to wave and walk and you have
Yeah.
space and you're the one handing things out, and yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know, that maybe that's the theater kid in me, but
Maybe. Yeah. You want all the attention.
yeah.
Oh, funny.
So first day of school started this week.
Yeah. My kids had their first day of school on Thursday. It was pretty good. We got to the school on time. We met the teachers.
Because this, for
There
anybody
was
just listening, this is a new school
new school for all the kids.
and going
Um,
from Catholic to public.
yes, so it's a big change and there's a lot of nerves. My little guy kept blinking and it was because he was trying not to cry, which broke my little heart, but they all had a really good day. The only problem was that my twin girl, Claire, was running and bailed like hard right before school
Oh,
started. So she scraped her face, she scraped her knees, she scraped her hands. It was like a whole thing. And so that really put a damper on the mood. But her teacher gave her a band aid, and that seemed to make things better. And you picked them up from school. So that was awesome.
yeah, it was so fun. Whenever I have to pick up a kid, it doesn't matter. Like, I've known your kids their whole lives,
Yeah.
but if I have to pick up a kid where there are a lot of kids, I get nervous that I won't be able to recognize them or find them. Or like when the bell goes, it is like
Yeah.
kicking an anthill.
Oh my God. It's like,
Kids just
it's
start
everywhere.
pouring out.
Yeah.
People come from out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I first went and drove to the junior high where your oldest started grade 8. I was like, I wanted to be cool. Like, it's not cool having an adult come pick you up at a certain
Right.
age.
Right.
And so I like texted them and was just like, hey, this is where I am. And then I was standing outside my car trying to look cool. First of all, junior high kids are awkward. And as all
Oh,
the kids started coming out, I was like, ugh. I was like, I don't
so
think we look like this
awkward.
in junior high. But
So funny looking.
they're
So
so awkward, funny.
stinky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Right.
they made 3 new friends in their class on the very first day.
I know. I love that so much. They found the gay kids
They were like, I
and your
looked around
people.
and I went to the table that had the gayest looking kids. And I went there and I was like, that's what you
Yeah,
got to do.
absolutely. I think it's good. There was a lot of struggles last year at school, and this was definitely, I think, a good change for them to just be in a different environment and a little bit more accepting place and just feel a little bit better about who they are.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so great.
I
And then I
know.
went over to the elementary school And I was standing with all the other adults, and I was like, I feel like I'm not an adult in this group. But they like kicked the anthill. All the kids came out, and luckily your kids found me because I certainly did not see them right off the bat.
Yeah, no, that's good.
But
That's good.
your middle kid, Kate, was holding another girl's hand. And I was like, hi, who's this kid? And she's like, hi, we're best friends now. And I was like, this is great.
Sure.
Yeah. She was like, can Kate come over for a play date? And I was like, do you have a grown up here? Did you meet her mom?
No, I didn't meet her mom. I did see her the next morning at school, the kid, but I didn't see who she belonged to.
Did she say her name?
She did, and now I can't remember it again.
Because I asked Kate after, and she's like, I don't remember her name. And I was like, oh, that's fair. You can be best friends without knowing somebody's name, I guess. Wyatt started a new school.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't even have a teacher for that class until the day before school started. There was an email from the principal being like, I've got irons in the fire. Don't worry, we'll have somebody. So he got a teacher and he showed up and he was so nervous, but he already made a friend. But then, so he's taking the school bus for the first time.
Mhm.
He wanted his dad to drive him to school. And then we were like, yeah, and then you can just take the bus home. And he was the only one on the school bus on the way
Oh,
home.
no.
It was just him and the bus driver.
That's so
But
funny.
it was great though. Olivia didn't start a new school, but started grade 7.
Yep.
Lindsay drove past the bus stop, and I guess she like went over to the car and she was like, Mom, what are you doing?
Like,
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
God. Yeah.
I don't want people
It
to
was
know I
so
have
funny.
a mom who cares about
I know.
me.
Yeah.
God,
So
how
embarrassing. Yeah.
So funny.
Seems like everybody survived, and then everybody's back next week, and you're off for a whole week.
I am off all next week, except it's good and bad. Like I gypped myself because I only really have 3.5 days at home without the kids because
Wait, we have
Monday's
to
a holiday.
re-say that. We have to re-say that. You can't say gypped.
Why?
It's offensive because it comes from the term gypsied, which is like a class of people, a culture of people.
Yeah.
And they're like this, the stereotype is that they're like cheap or scammy.
Swindlers. Oh, yeah.
Swindlers.
Okay. Okay. Know better, do better. So I have been
Duped.
kind of. I did it to myself. I
Scammed?
just didn't look at the schedule better.
Mm.
I'm glad that I have this week off, but my kids also have Monday off and then they have half Friday. So I have 3.5 days really to just do
Okay.
all the things that I need to do, which is fine. Better than being at work.
Yeah.
It'll be good. This weekend is like crazy busy because I've got my 11-year-old turned 11 yesterday, Saturday. My twins turned 6 today. We have their party tomorrow. So the beginning of September is always just crazy for us with school and birthdays and all of that.
I feel
It'll
so
be
bad.
good.
I booked us 3 interviews today.
Yeah.
I'm
Way
so
to care about my
sorry.
kids' birthdays. God.
I know. I was like, birthday schmerz day.
No, it's good though because like we open their presents in the morning and now they're like occupied with their gifts. So
Oh, okay.
I can record. So I've had minimal interruptions so far.
Okay, good. One thing that we did not talk enough about last time is our Patreon.
Yes. What's that?
A Patreon is a monthly subscription as a way to support the work that we do. And as a thank you, we give you 2 bonus episodes every single month.
Mm-hmm.
And for our top tier, we also do a video episode every month, and it's called Wet Wednesdays.
It
Because
is
that's funny to
unfortunately
say.
called Wet Wednesdays.
I'm so sorry, but it's so funny. It just stuck.
And honestly, it's so fun. We've done 3 recordings so far.
Yeah.
And they've all been super fun. Yeah, it's just an extra way to get more content from us. Also, the top 2 tiers, you get our Patreon episodes a day early. So
Yep.
another little bonus about joining the Patreon. We have like over 60 episodes. We have videos. We do giveaways. We ask for your opinions on episodes that we should cover.
It is really fun.
It's a little
So
more loosey-goosey over there.
it's it's true. We do swear a lot over there.
We do.
If you like what you're hearing and you want to support the work that we do and you have capacity, and you always
Wow.
remind people, I'm always impressed. You remind people that like you could sign up for 1 month, listen,
Yeah.
and then maybe take a couple months off and then
Totally.
come back. It's very fluid.
Because as soon as you sign up, you get all that back catalog. You don't
Hmm.
start from where you are. So you can sign up for a month, binge your little heart out, and then take a break for a couple months, whatever works for your finances. I follow a lot of Patreons and I do that as well.
That's amazing.
I think so too.
Do you know how I'm a little delayed in catching on to things that are trendy?
I do. I do know that.
I just placed my first click and collect grocery order.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm a pioneer of the click and collect.
With online shopping, you were a pioneer. I was very late to the game.
Absolutely.
Facebook,
Absolutely.
Instagram, Pinterest,
Yeah.
like all the things. I'm TikTok, but I'm really nervous that I'm going to go there and not know what to do, or that they're going to give me somebody else's groceries, or I'll do it wrong.
No, it's a very fluid process. It's pretty easy. You just get there, you call them, you say, I'm here, this is my spot. They bring you your groceries. I think in the beginning, there were a lot of issues with a lot of substitutions. I remember for a long time there was like, oh, we're out of this, we're out of that. I'm like, I could walk into that store right now and find it. I know you're not out of that. Or
Right.
substituted one time hamburger buns for hot dog buns. I'm like, I don't know if you know the shape here, but it's not the same. But I've been doing it since before the twins were born. So over 6 years.
Oh my God.
And
I didn't even know it's been around that long.
oh, yeah. It just started a couple months before the twins were born. And I remember thinking, like, this is a game changer.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's amazing. Big fan.
I may call you while I'm there just for moral support.
Well, I think that you should be vlogging your entire experience.
My first click and collect.
And share it with the class. Yeah.
I might.
Knowing you, something will go awry.
I'm very awkward. I'm very awkward.
You're going to try to help, but then it's going to be weird, or you're just going to like most people sit in their car. You'll probably get out and stand there and watch them.
100%. Yeah. Oh boy. Should we get into this week's episode?
Absolutely, we should.
So let us know what you think.
Yeah.
I feel like we also don't tell people enough. It means the world to us if you leave us a 5-star review.
Absolutely. Tell us what you like about the show, and yeah, give us feedback. We love feedback.
Okay, let's get into it.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hello, Brandon.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I am doing wonderful. How are you both?
Yeah, good. We're surviving a heat wave in Calgary right now.
Yeah, that must be nice. It's hot here in Ottawa too, but it's just been cloudy and rainy like all week. So all month, I guess it's been a weird summer for us.
Yeah.
Weird, yeah.
We are so excited to chat with you. So thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thanks for having me. I think a lot of people on TikTok are afraid to kind of reach out to people when they see these stories. I love it. Obviously, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of people who've kind of reached out to me and just connected, like people with their own life altering traumas, their own different stories. And it's one of the greatest gifts I think I could have ever asked for, is having the ability to connect with all these, I think, really cool people I never would have met otherwise. So
yeah,
if anybody's listening to this and wants to connect, send me a message, because I love that you guys reached out. I love when everybody reaches out, and I'm pretty bad with my phone sometimes, but I try to get back as much as I can, even if it's in a week or 2 weeks when I get the chance. So
yeah,
it's funny. I was just thinking that actually 20 years ago, if this had happened to you, you wouldn't be able to really get your message out there unless you were invited to like a school to talk at an assembly. So it is such a powerful tool to have social media, that you can just get to so many people all over the world in a split second and share what you've been through. So it's incredible.
It's cool too. I think, like, for me, it's cool to be able to share my story, but it's also cool to be able to hear other people's stories. In my unique case, I really fed off of a lot of mentors who'd been through similar things to me, just a year, months, year, whatever in advance. So they were further along in the recovery process, and I kind of got to pick their brains.
Yeah.
And I never would have known these people even existed had it not been for social media. So for me, I'm just trying to pay it back now in the same ways that these kind of people who inspired me did and changed my life. Right. So it's a beautiful tool, not just to get your message out there, but also to, I think, find some purpose in what you're going through and change some other lives as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would love it if you could introduce yourself, maybe tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll get into your story.
Sure. So my name's Brandon Peacock, like the bird. I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. I've been here my whole life. It's a pretty nice, like, kind of government town. Both my parents worked. My mom was a part-time worker. My dad worked a more blue-collar role. So I was always a pretty middle-class kid. Grew up in the suburbs, played sports, all of that good stuff, and lived a pretty average Canadian life that you would say. Went to school for business law, enjoyed it, and then realized I only liked the business component, hated the law component. So started working in the corporate world right out of school, and then got shot and everything kind of changed. So
My God.
there's tons of stuff in my life I could talk about, but I mean, that doesn't really provide that much value to people sometimes.
Yeah.
That's the synopsis, I guess, the very quick notes.
Wow. And like we were saying before we officially started, when we first heard your story, we were shocked that this happened in Canada to a Canadian. We just have this like perception that this is something that happens in America. So yeah, can you tell us like what happened?
Yeah. So first, we could talk about that a little bit later too. I think it happens more in Canada than a lot of people here. And there's reasons for that. Sometimes it doesn't come out in the media. A lot of times the situations are just a little bit different in the States, right? And I think our gun laws are so much stricter. There's less of a narrative to run with, but it does happen. There's a rise, I think, in gang specific violence. And the unfortunate reality is there's oftentimes innocent bystanders who become collateral to that. So that's my case. And just in my city, actually, of Ottawa, I worked with another kid who went through the same exact thing a year later.
Wow.
And in London, Ontario, Toronto is getting a little bit worse for it, but there is definitely reasons why that stuff doesn't come out. And I understand them. Typically gang related violence, they don't release any names to the media stories. So when people hear about it, they just anticipate gang related shooting, 2 people hit. They just assume it's all gang members who are impacted, and they don't want to share the information because they don't want you to have any affiliation. So they don't want people seeing your name and maybe coming after you, whatever. So those stories don't really get out there, but they happen a lot more than you would anticipate.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just something that no one really thinks about. And I never would have in a million years thought about. Right. I remember there was kind of a good amount of outrage, I think, from my friends as everything happened, because the initial story that was published basically made me look like a gang member. It didn't have my name. It didn't have anything. It's just time, date of the shooting, and 23-year-old in critical condition, basically like a 3-line story. And it's just, it happens every day. You see them, you just pass over them. It's just like, oh, well, I guess that's just what's happening in the bad part of town today. Yeah. And my friends actually got this story changed, funny enough. I didn't particularly care that much, but they were a little offended by it. So they reached out and they're like, hey, like, this kid's not in a gang. This is just a regular everyday kid. You guys got to highlight this.
Yeah.
So anyways, it happens more than you'd think. But to get into my stories, so basically what ended up happening is I was walking in to get a haircut after a typical day of work. So 5:45 p.m. I was walking in the door to the barber shop. And at this time it was COVID protocol. So there was a woman who was holding the door open for me because I couldn't touch the door handle. This was about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic. And I'm about 10 meters from the door, and the target of the shooting is sitting on a bench outside of the barbershop that I'm going into. He owns the neighboring store, I guess, something like that. I really don't know too much of the case details, but obviously this I know because I remember it. And this car pulls up and begins to open fire at this guy. He sprints in the door that's being held open for me to get away because he sees it coming at first. So now it's me and the woman who's holding the door open for me left at the back of the pile with bullets flying at us. No. So I was lucky enough I'm 6'2", so she's about 5'4", and I was lucky enough to just be able to launch the 2 of us in, right? Just because I had the bigger frame. We're both going to the same spot anyways, and launch both of us in. I got hit 3 times. So once in the left leg, once in the right femoral artery, which is a bad spot to get shot. The bleed out, I believe it's the 2nd or 3rd highest death rate for a shooting. It's actually, I believe, a higher rate than getting hit in the head, just because the bleed out's so high. Like had it been 4 minutes and 30 seconds of me laying on the ground without a tourniquet on my leg, I wouldn't survive.
Wow.
And then the 3rd bullet hit me in the chest. So that one, I must have hit me when I was bent over, because it came in my lower shoulder blade and came out just below my shoulder. So it somehow missed my heart and only bruised my lungs, but broke all my ribs. But I mean, like, broken ribs is nothing. And an injury like that, like, I've played sports, like, you break ribs, it happens. It's annoying because you can't breathe that well, but I would have been out of the hospital the next day. But the femoral artery gunshot was a major problem. And I was lying on the floor, bleeding out, thinking about life, everything. There's lots of stuff that was going through my head. And an officer who happens to be across the street getting a coffee at a Tim Hortons runs across the street, gets the call in, sprints like directly basically through traffic to the shop about 200 meters away, and gets a tourniquet on my leg in 4 minutes, stops the bleed out, saves my life. So that's the only reason I'm here today is thanks to that man. And yeah, so that's the shooting itself. It's a pretty crazy story, I think, but
No
it's
kidding.
an amazing story as well.
You don't ever like, how do you even react in that short amount of time to know?
It's going to sound crazy. I'll tell you how I reacted. And I feel like I probably reacted different than most people would. I was like not panicked at all. It was the weirdest thing because I feel like you hear something like this happens and you're like, wow, like this kid must have been like horrified. He's going to die. I was like,
yeah.
The only thing that stressed me out at that time was knowing that if I was to die, I wouldn't have been happy with the mark I'd left on my life. So I still had a lot of goals I wanted to accomplish. I had a lot of things that I really wanted to chase. And that kind of kept me motivated. But I remember the first things I was thinking about when I was laying on that ground, it wasn't like, this is so terrible, I can't believe what just happened to me. It wasn't like fear. It was, okay, you know what? When I get back from this, when I'm in the hospital recovering, I'm going to get some time off work. There's some books I wanted to read for a while. There's some projects I wanted to work on. And that's going to sound crazy, but it was like right from the hop. It wasn't if I get back. There was no doubts. It was, this is going to be great because I'm going to have a little bit of free time that I didn't think I had before. This is no different to me than like breaking my leg at this point. And to me, it was fantastic. It was like a blessing. It was like, okay, whatever. Like, this sucks, but what's next? And then everyone around me is freaking out. Like the woman who's in there we're like, I don't know, trying to compress my wounds and save my life. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, what's next? What do we do when we get through this? I'm already at step 5 in the recovery process, right on that spot. And I remember the woman who was in there with me was like 100% certain I was going to die. We've talked about this after. She did not think there was a chance in hell that I made it through. So she gives me the phone and she dials my mom. So I call my mom as I'm bleeding out on the ground. And I'm just like, hey mom, it's going to sound crazy. I got shot. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. But I just wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from like anybody else. Right.
Yeah. And
so now like my mom's obviously freaking out and the cops get in at that point. They take the phone away from me. So I didn't hear her response. I didn't hear anything other than get that message out. And so now my mom's freaking out. My family's kind of freaking out. They obviously can't hear from me. I don't have my cell phone. I'm being rushed into surgery. It's COVID protocol too. So they wouldn't let anyone in the hospital. Yeah. There's all these crazy kind of like factors, but from the start, I was just so cool, collected. I was like, okay, I'm going to be fine. Even though everyone around me was like, this kid is not going to be fine.
Yeah. How old were you when this happened?
23.
And do you think did you just not understand the gravity of the situation, or was it just, nope, there's no other option, this is what I need to do?
I think I understood the gravity for sure. Like immediately I was like, well, this is a big problem. I knew that it was bad, but in my eyes, I love going through hard times. And I've been like that since I was a kid. Like, there's just something about it. That is what gets me up. It fires me up and inspires me. That's what I love to do. So when I was on that ground bleeding out, it was, this is just going to be this is a massive competitive advantage that I now have in my life. Cause this is like one of the craziest stories, like right off the hop, I knew that. So it was kind of like, you know what, if I die, if I don't make it, that's fine, whatever. But I need to start planning like I do, if like I'm going to make it. Right. And it was right from that moment that I recognized, like I knew how hard it was going to be. And it was even a lot harder than I anticipated at that exact moment, for sure. Because there's a lot of things that come at you don't anticipate. But from that moment, I think my attitude was pretty positive. I mean, I honestly think that's what got me through the night. Because had I passed out, had I closed my eyes for a little bit too long, I was dead. If I had given in, I was told like, there's no way this kid's coming back. So they basically had to help keep me awake the entire night. And I had to stay dialed in for 2 hours. The adrenaline started to wear off too. And you're drained. Like it's hard to explain. But when you lose that much blood, like you are just out of energy. Your battery's running at 0. It's just continuing to push through. And for me, knowing that I was going to make the most of this situation and reminding myself that all night was really what pushed me through. I was incredibly lucky in a lot of ways, but I think right off the hop, I was never once, I think, stressed about it, never upset, never really felt the victim to the circumstance. It was more like, what a beautiful blessing that I've been given. What's next? So it was weird for sure though.
Did you have people trying to bring you down or give you a reality check and dampen your positivity?
No, they did it. The medical team, the paramedics, everybody involved, I think, did a fantastic job. And you could tell it was very intense for them. Like they cleared out an entire floor at the hospital. Like it was on lockdown. I was right at the shift turnover too. So I had every surgeon that you could think of on that case, because there was the surgeons that just finished their shifts and the surgeons that were just coming in. There was like, at certain points, probably 15 people in my hospital room prepping me for surgery, going through everything. And they were pretty intense. But there was also in that grouping people who would try to keep me at ease. And my dad did manage to get into the hospital. So basically he just showed up. They're like, you can't come in. And he's like, I don't care. Like I'm coming in. And I guess someone, because they couldn't release my information because it was all gang related incidents. They can't tell anybody who you are. So my dad only knew about my shooting because of the call, showed up and was like basically forced his way in. One of the doctors found out and he's like, yeah, like this kid might die. He's like, his dad can come see him in case he dies type thing.
Yeah.
My mom, they were a hard stance. So she was about 45 minutes away at our cottage and she was going to drive in and they were a hard stance. Like she will not get in, but I got to see my dad and he really filled that role of the positive influence as I started to taper off a little bit. Because as positive as I was, when your gas tank's at completely empty, you're starting to lose it a little bit. And I remember he walked in and it was a relief. I think the first thing I said, I laughed at him. I was like, man, like you got to get some Gatorades for me in the morning. Like I need these electrolytes or something. And like my brain is at 1/10 capacity, 0/10 probably. It's hard to explain. Like my arms were totally numb. Like it's, if you've ever done like an athletic challenge that is just incredibly intense, it's that times 100. But yeah, so having him show up, it really put me at ease. And funny enough, we didn't talk a whole lot in there, but we didn't really need to. Like just having him by my side to remind me like it's good, like you're gonna be fine. This is if this happened to anybody, thank God it happened to you because you're gonna get through it. Like we know this. And it reinforced, I think, that confidence that I had already felt. And it really allowed me to stay positive through everything. And there was also another point to me and him talking was once I started to taper off a little bit, I remember right before I was about to go into surgery, I kind of looked at him and the last thing he said to me before surgery was, how you feeling? It was a check-in. He wanted to just probably for himself, right? Like he wants to see how I'm doing because he wants to get a feel. Like doctors have told him I got a 50-50 shot to make it through the night. And even if I do, I'm probably losing my right leg. Like they'd prepared him for that. And so now he's, I think, not showing it to me, but at the end, he's, a little stressed, right? Like his son might not ever see him again. He's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, man, you know what? It's really starting to hurt. Like at that point, my adrenaline is worn off. I'm out of any sort of energy I have. I'm fully as completely dehydrated as you can be. And I remember looking at him and I was just like, it's bad. Like this is terrible kind of thing. And he looks at me, he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, my leg hurts so much. Like it's in so much pain. He looks back at me, just smiles. He's like, that's amazing news. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, if you've got pain in your leg, buddy, you still got a leg, right? Like you should be counting your blessings that you can feel that pain, because if you couldn't wiggle those toes, if you couldn't feel that just in 20 out of 10 pain in your leg, it's gone. And at that moment, like that, it's the weirdest thing. The situation to me was life-changing, but that moment itself has changed like the way I live my life every day. It fully switched up my relationship, not just with pain, but with struggle. And I already had a vested enjoyment for going through hard times. But at that moment, it really all just clicked. Like everything in my life that I thought I appreciated just clicked in even more. So it changed my life. And then I went into surgery and woke up the next morning and was just ready to get after it.
Wow.
And was there any point that police or doctors didn't know that you were involved in the gang? Was it assumed from the beginning that you were, or was it obvious that you were?
So it was assumed from the start. And when anything like that happens, the likelihood of being involved in a gang shooting without actually being a representative in a gang is pretty low. They definitely off the hop questioned me as though I was involved. That's why they took the phone. They didn't know who I was on the phone with. They didn't know who I was calling, what I was saying. So they took the phone. They did question me for sure off the start and in the ambulance, but I believe it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that I had no involvement. And so although they questioned me, I think when they realized that it was like life or death for me, they just let it go a little bit. And then they came back, they questioned me the next morning, but it was pretty straightforward. It was do you know this? Do you know this? I'm like, I don't know anything. And there's also witnesses, right? Like the people who work at the shop were like, yeah, like this kid's on our schedule. This is his appointment slot, all these things. So it kind of fell into place. And I will say the police, I understand why they did what they did, because they want to make sure they're getting as much information. And they were like incredibly helpful in my recovery. And a lot of them went out of their ways to, I think, follow up with me too, which was, it's sometimes the stories you don't hear. And these guys are coming out of their way to, they were a part of the night that changed my life. And they're coming out of their way to say, like, how are you doing? Like, how are you recovering? Like, how is your physical recovery, but also how is your psychological recovery, right? They're like, we get it. We know how hard those things are. How do you feel, man? And I got really lucky. So they definitely, I think, off the hop assumed that I was involved, but as they kind of started to assess the situation, were more like, they were more helpful than anything, which was really nice.
Was anybody else injured during?
So I believe the target was hit once, but I honestly didn't really follow up with it too much. If I just saw that in a news article and it was non-life threatening, however he got hit.
And so your recovery in the hospital, how long was that?
So I was in the hospital for about 10 days, which really isn't that much, but I really forced my way out of there. The hospital that I was at, the Ottawa Civic, is a top tier trauma center in the Canadian public healthcare system. They are like absolutely phenomenal, probably one of the best in the country, which is, again, bodes really well for me keeping my leg.
Yeah.
But it's hot. There's no AC. I was in a room with 2 roommates as of day 3. So they wouldn't, because it was the pandemic, they wouldn't let me pay additional fee for my own room. Wow. My insurance provider, like, worked a solid job at the time. My insurance provider was going to cover as much as I needed, type thing. I was really desperate to get that solo room, and they wouldn't give it to me because of capacity restrictions. I was like extremely weak. I barely ate for, I want to say 8, 9, 10. I barely ate actually when I was home. So barely ate for a month. I was down probably like 20 pounds in weight. I couldn't really go to the bathroom or anything. I was just like beat. And I was in there for 10 days and they wouldn't let me leave until I could walk up a set of 2 stairs with a walker or with crutches, but walk up a set of 2 stairs and kind of check all the boxes from the doctors. But I hadn't slept in 7 days. So once I started having roommates, the 2 roommates I had were both having like psychological breakdowns. I don't know what it was, but they were like screaming all night, every night. They were super loud all day too. Like they didn't stop ever. And it was about 35 degrees Celsius at the time, just boiling hot outside with no AC. So I was just sweating buckets and like losing even more weight and just getting like way worse. And I hadn't slept. Like I was running on 3 hours sleep every night, which is like brutal when you're trying to recover from these things. And as positive as I was, it was definitely taking a toll on me. You're starting to get almost like hallucinations when you're sleeping that little. So I remember walking down the hall and up the 2 stairs that I had to walk up was like the hardest challenge in my life to date. Like I ran a marathon a year after. I've been through intense physio. I've done a lot of stuff. And those 2 stairs were like the most daunting, like difficult challenge I've ever done.
Yeah.
But I did it. I got out of that hospital that same afternoon. I guess that was day 10 then. I walked those 2 stairs, got back. All of my doctors had signed off my request to leave because they knew like I hadn't slept. They knew how bad I was. And they're just like, you just got to bring him in like once a day. Like I was out, but I was going to be back every day. I was just going to be able to sleep at my home. And my parents set up a kind of like a bedroom space for me on the ground level of our home in the garage almost, but I couldn't walk up steps. I forced those 2 steps. But when I got home, my dad just threw me over his shoulders, threw me in a bed. And then I stayed in that bed for 7 days. So I was in like home care basically at the at home instead of the hospital so I could sleep. But the 2 steps was really challenging. We had to get sign-offs from every doctor, and the only person who didn't sign me off, funny enough, was my social worker didn't sign me off. And the social worker, and I am so pro psychotherapy. It's something my charity covers. It's something I really care about. But she didn't sign me off because she kept telling me about like, the victim kind of counseling programs and all these things. And I was like, look, like I get it. I don't need that right now. And that's to say, like, I had a great community around me. I had a lot of people too who reached out and were coddled me a little bit. Like, look, like I get it. I get how difficult this is. I understand. I just like, I'm not there yet. Need to just focus entirely on my kind of rehab. I can't talk to these specialists right now. I'm talking to, in my network, I had a couple of friends who'd been through some real serious traumas, and I spoke with them every day, like probably 50 to 100 messages sent back and forth every day. I had my own kind of little circle of like survivors that was providing me the same sort of guidance. Anyways, long story short, the social worker didn't sign off, but physio signed off the last check. And one of my doctors was like, all right, whatever, get out of here kind of thing. You need to sleep.
Yeah.
So I got out of the hospital, got home, and it expedited my recovery tremendously.
Yeah.
The first week of being home, I couldn't really do much because I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand on either of my legs really. But B, I still had really big open wounds because they had to do a fasciotomy on my right leg to, I guess, limit the swelling because I have bigger calves. So when the blood started to swell up and there was not a lot of like area for expansion, it was about to blow my leg up.
Oh my
So they had to do
God.
massive slits basically on both sides, and they had to do what's called a femoral bypass surgery. So they took the saphenous vein out of my left leg, put it in my right leg to replace my artery. So all that to say, I've got massive open wounds on both legs, like everywhere. So I was bedridden for about a week. And then the second I got approval to start physio, one of my best friends, a physiotherapist, this was probably about 15 days after everything, where I actually just started just getting crazy with it, like aggressive physio where I can barely move my leg and he's physically just taking my leg and bending it behind my head.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But it was a blessing. Like getting out of that hospital, I rambled a little bit there, but getting out of the hospital was the most beneficial thing that I could have ever asked for in my recovery, because it changed up everything. Like my quality of care went up 100x, and it probably put me like months ahead right off that in my recovery.
And did you have to call your work and be like, hey, I'm not going to be in tomorrow because I got shot?
So the work one is actually like hilarious. So I didn't have my phone when I woke up the morning after, but I did have a hospital iPad, and I didn't, like, my parents came and visited me. So they were the first people I reached out to through somebody else. So I didn't actually message them myself. Someone just said, hey, we'll get them. And they both got to see me the morning after, which is nice. The second person I reached out to, because I'm a millennial, I don't know any of my friends' phone numbers off heart. Like I don't know any of that stuff. So I have this iPad with only FaceTime access through emails. And so I email one of my colleagues who I was a really good friend with at the time. I'm like, hey man, what's your cell number? I'm going to FaceTime you. I got shot last night. Or like just something crazy, like this, like literally one liner. And he thinks I'm messing with him. Like he has no idea what to expect. And I FaceTime, I'm like hooked up to tubes everywhere. Like I've got a breathing, I'm basically like in 1 out of 100 shape. If you saw one of your friends FaceTime you like this, you'd be like, man, like this guy just went through like a head-on collision, right? And so he's in the office. He's about to walk into a performance review, funny enough. And he gets this FaceTime from me. And he just looks like he saw a ghost. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm alive, man. Like, this is great. Like I'm telling the story. He's like, everyone's just fine. He's the first one to find out. And he like he just got passed through by a ghost. There's no emotion in his eyes, his face, like he's disoriented. So he got the message out to work, and then work emailed me, and they emailed my mom, I guess. And they all took care of everything, but they were actually like, my employer was the first person I reached out to, not necessarily out of fear that I wasn't going to be there. Obviously that wasn't going to be a big deal, but just because it was convenient, because I knew the email of one of my good friends who worked there. And then slowly the news started getting out and everybody found out that day.
That's so crazy. I wanted to touch a little bit on what you were saying about the social worker in the hospital. I think it's interesting because I think she's probably going by her protocol, and if he needs to make sure that he's doing these things, right? But what you said, it's not one size fits all when it comes to recovery, especially with your mental health. We're so pro therapy over here, but
I'm too, for what it's worth.
Like
absolutely. 100%
absolutely
pro.
But it's not always the time. Like you said, you needed to sleep, you needed to recover, you needed to do physio, and then you can deal with that. Like I said,
I had a couple mentors, but one in particular who was a good friend of he actually wasn't a friend of mine before, funny enough. He just was a mutual through some connections that I had, who ended up being put in a coma for about 10 days after being hit in a motor vehicle pedestrian accident on Canada Day in Ottawa. And so he was told that he was never going to mentally recover. He was going to have severe brain damage for the rest of his life. And then a year and a half later, he made his college basketball debut. So he did some incredible things, and he reached out to me. And I was very lucky, I think, to have a great network in Ottawa. Like Ottawa, probably similar to Calgary, honestly, is a big, small town. Like everybody knows everybody. So when everything happened with me, I had hundreds, maybe thousands of people reach out, and you can't really get back to everybody. But I had this one message that kind of stuck out where it's, I get what you're going through. You're going to have 100 people who are telling you they feel bad for you and to take your time and to process things. I'm here to tell you, don't do that. He reached out. He's like, my biggest regret in my recovery is I sat back and I really played the victim for a while, and all it did was delay
Wow.
my process. And I heard that off the hop, and we talked every day, and I was going through it. Like, it's people, because I was so motivated off the bat, people all just assumed I was fine. And I really presented myself in that way. I was going through a lot, trying to figure out, like, and understand what had happened to me, how my life was going to be different forever. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to walk properly again. I didn't know if I was going to
Right.
be back to sports ever. I had no idea. So for me, having those mentors was tremendous because it was someone who could actually put me in my place. And that's the unfortunate problem with a lot of therapists. It's funny, the guy I was talking about actually is going to school for psychology, wants to be a therapist to help out other trauma survivors. So he is a big inspiration of mine. Having mentors who've been in the space, who've lived it, at least in my unique case, helped me 100x what any psychotherapist could have at that time, or any professional with a piece of paper that says that they understand that stuff. Because I needed to know somebody who had been through the same stuff and gotten to a point where they were living a better life because of it. And that's what I needed. So when it came to the therapy, like, I already had the thing that I thought was the most beneficial recovery tool. And I only had so much bandwidth to listen to somebody or talk to somebody or really put my focus and attention into somebody's message. So I had that from him. So I see the benefit, especially for people who might not have as strong of a community. And I think always having that resource to talk to and outlet is important. And that's why I try to get my story out there too, because I have a ton of people who reach out to me who are going through my process X amount of months, years. Like, everything happened 2 years ago for me. But if someone's going through that right now, they're not where I'm at 2 years later. So that's why I started my charity. That's why my message is out there, to do what Michael was able to do for me to other individuals. So I think therapy is incredibly important, and I think a lot of people would benefit from it. It's not necessarily something that I personally benefited from, although I did it, but I also was really fortunate to have basically therapist in my life, right? So especially for those who might not have the same incredibly fortunate bounces that I had in terms of having those resources and people, I always recommend it. I think it's always great. But with the kids that I work with now, I really try to be there for them, like a coach combination, right? I'll reassure them that their feelings and emotions and hardships they go through are valid, but also remind them, like, hey man, even if it is valid, I don't want you to just sit here and really waste your life, like this incredible gift that you have, because you're feeling shitty about what you went through, right? Like, I know how real it is, but you will never actually get over this trauma that you've been through unless you start putting in the work. Because as much as everybody else wants to help you, you're the only one who really controls your story at the end of the day, your response. So sometimes the therapists are good, but I think having someone who really gets it in your corner is the most beneficial thing that any trauma survivor across the board could have.
I thought it was really interesting. The one TikTok video that Carling had showed me, you were talking about your perspective of, as you were going through life or death, you're thinking about all these things and you're thinking, and you want other people to feel that, but you don't want them to go through what you went through. But it is a really interesting perspective to have after you've been through trauma.
It's funny. I talked with my parents actually about that exact sentiment today, because for me, I think my ultimate life goal at this point is to be able to work full time on growing my charity, because I see the benefit to it. And I've seen firsthand how many people need the resources that we're trying to give out that don't have it. But in order for me to grow it to that point, like, I got to be spending all my time doing it. I'm working a day job right now to pay the bills, obviously. But I think my grandpa, he had a heart attack, I think about a year ago. His whole perspective on life changed. Having that near-death experience, he's like, I wish I could go back and do some things differently. I wish I could go back and maybe take more risks, not just work that 9 to 5 that he did for his whole life. And it sounds silly. It's hard for me to explain that to my parents because they've never really been through it. But you get reminded how beautiful of a gift life is when you almost lose it. So you hit it on the head. I wish that everybody could go through what I went through and have the proper resources to be able to take on the perspectives that we do. Because the unfortunate reality is some people don't. And it breaks my heart. Maybe it's survivor's guilt. I don't know. But because I've seen the incredible things that can be done with the right resources, the right team, the right attitude, I really want to do my best to manufacture that for as many kind of survivors of trauma as I can, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, and give them the
Absolutely.
same kind of benefits that we've been able to take out of these like terrible situations. And I
Yeah.
think I've been incredibly fortunate to have similar experiences in my unique recovery process, where there's one guy, his name's Tyrone. He reached out to me on TikTok, and he happened to be shot 9 times. So 6 more times than me, which again puts everything like really in perspective for me. Wow, like as cool as my story is, this guy got 3 times the bullets and he's good, you know?
Crazy.
Yeah.
But in talking with him, we shared our stories with one another, and it was the same sort of thing, whereas it lined up.
Mhm.
Everything seemed to be the same. Like the emotions we felt the night of, the emotions we felt the nights after, the things that we remember, it was like someone telling me my story.
Yeah.
And it was
Mhm.
kind of in a weird way, but not that weird way. You don't feel alone in it, right?
Yeah.
Like you feel when you go through these sorts of things, it's really easy to feel like the world is against you because you feel like you're the only one who has to go through what you're going through. And it makes it that much harder to want to ultimately recover from everything because you just don't feel like anyone gets it.
Yeah.
And that could be the therapist you're talking to, that could be your friends who are trying to cheer you up. It's really difficult. And I think having that individual that you can connect with on a deeper level, even if they're not someone who's in your life for an extended period of time, just someone that also went through the same thing as you did, it really reinforces every kind of belief that you've had. And it
Yeah.
validates the difficult times, but it also validates that it can be overcome. That's what I think is incredible.
When you share your story and say that you were shot, but then it lit a fire in you that you're gonna keep going and all these things, people put it into what they would have done. If I got shot, I would maybe lay there forever, or I wouldn't recover, or things like that, because they want to relate. But
Yep.
you never know what you're going to do until it happens to you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true in a way. I think that sometimes having my friends, in at least in my unique case, if I was starting to stagnate, I think they would maybe question me a little bit. Like my dad was probably my biggest. So when I did physiotherapy, the first 2 months, I was there seven days a week, 3 to 6 hours, actually probably 5 to 8 hours a day. There all the time, lived it. And this is actually like part of my story. I think that's the most amazing. And when I say I was probably the ideal specimen to get shot, like 100, I genuinely believe it, because my best friend who's a physiotherapist was also waiting on his results from his national, I guess, physiotherapist association exam. And it kept getting delayed because of the pandemic. So he couldn't take his exam. So he couldn't practice as a licensed physio in clinic. So he was off on CERB, like the COVID relief benefit.
Yeah.
And he had a gym in his basement and he just didn't have anything to do. So he heard everything. Like we were super, super close. And he would I'd come over, I'd live at his house basically, just work out all day, every day. He'd stretch me out. He'd do his own little workouts on the side when I got a little bit better. And it's all we did. We lived in the gym. And my dad, if I started to get a little bit complacent, there was days where I had like incredible nerve pain. If I had just some really tough things going on, and I'd be like, I don't know if I'm gonna go to physio today. He'd be like, oh, it's like it was like I took this time off from work to drive you places. Like,
Yeah.
you're not just gonna waste a day of this. It was like a non-negotiable. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to be able to understand people's unique response patterns. But I think sometimes like the people who really care about you, and if some random guy that I just met was telling me how to live my trauma, I'd be like, no, like cut it out.
Yeah.
But having someone in your close circle who can hold you a little bit accountable to is nice, because you can also give them shit back and they won't take offense to it as much.
Yeah.
But back to the physio things, I think there's some cool stories with this. About 2 months in, like just to show how intense we were with it, my friend, he hadn't really done as much the summer as he normally would have because he was on Brandon duty. Like he was rehabbing me. So we missed out on a couple like weekends away, like those sorts of things. But by the end of August, I was physically able to move. And so he brought me to a cottage, like a cabin with his whole family, so we could still get our physio workouts done. It was just his family and me, and like his big extended family, like probably 30 people.
Oh my
Like a
God.
family retreat and me. And it was like an hour-long ATV through the woods to get to this location. And he literally just strapped my like limp body onto an ATV and just drove me through the forest. But that's how dedicated we were to the physio and the rehab. And where I realized that there's some gaps in the system with at least the physical recovery side of things was through that, because I was doing physio through my employer's like insurance plan like once a week, which was way too few times for my injury. Their goal is to get you back to desk shape. It's not to get you back to functional what you were before. And they didn't really care about my well-being. So that is what it is. Whatever. I've got my own beefs with insurance providers, but I understand that they have bottom lines. They fought us tooth and nail on as many of our claims as they could too when we did up the physio in the fall. But I saw the difference that it can make when you have a real physio who cares about you, who wants to push you through. And the thing is, most private practitioners do compared to the actual like OHIP. And again, that's not a knock on them. There's problems with, I think, the structure of the system. But finding that person for me, who was Frank, my physio, my friend, for my grantee right now, Gavin, his guy Tyler, cares. Like they care so much about seeing that person recover. That's their top priority. So I was lucky enough to have that, where I was like probably a year ahead in my recovery. Like the initial prognosis was maybe he'll be walking on his own in September. I was walking on my own by July 23rd, I think, my birthday in July. So under a month, where Frank was stretching me out. He literally took my crutches, said no more crutches. For like the second day I walked, said no more crutches. I walked back out to my car. My dad thinks this guy's a lunatic. There's no way we're giving this guy, we're going to another physio, right? Like we at this point, it's Brandon's recovery is priority one. This guy's going to hurt him. Like he's crazy.
Yeah.
But he took away those crutches and I started walking really quick. I didn't walk as much. I didn't spend a lot of time on my feet, but a week into having no crutches, I'd walk down the block to Starbucks. I'd walk like 500 meters. And then I called my mom to pick me up and she was never happy because she's like, I didn't know you left. Like that was like on a helicopter parented at that time. But I would just start doing stuff like that. And then you build your confidence back up and your physical traits start to come back. You just really need to push them. And a lot of people aren't treated that way. But because I had that guy who really cared and I was bought in, I had those benefits. Like I said, I was running by, I think, September, which was way before I was anticipated. I was skiing, doing all my sports in the winter, like everything was back. The physical recovery was tremendous. And that's where with the kids I'm working with now, I'm trying to at least give them the same opportunities. And I'm incredibly fortunate. And I see the shortcomings. I just want to do everything I can to fill that gap. Because when you're in your 20s and you go 20s, they're like whatever. But right now we've only really worked with kids in their 20s. When you're in their 20s going through something like that, like you should not lose your quality of life forever at the hands of someone else who you had no relationship with, right?
We've interviewed a lot of people who have been in accidents, who have lost the ability to walk, but their drive and determination is incredible. I can't even make myself walk on a treadmill, but to see them like working nonstop to walk again, and the amount of workouts and physical things that they're doing when they're probably in extreme pain is just incredible.
Fighting for your life.
Exactly.
Right? Like I think the kid that we're working with now, his name's Gavin. He's tremendous. I've been a huge fan of the kid since he's like 4 years younger than me, but of Gavin since he reached out to me. He got shot in the spine in a robbery in downtown Toronto. So basically what ended up happening was his brother, they're out after the bar one night and his brother gave a homeless guy $20 because there's a lot of homeless people. I don't know what it's like in Calgary, but there's a lot of them in Toronto and Ottawa right now. And so he just saw this guy down on his luck. I guess he talked to him a little bit, gave him $20, like a super nice gesture. This guy saw him do that, robbed them at gunpoint, and just started, because he's like, I assume these kids have money, and then just started beating the shit out of his brother. I guess Gavin stepped in to stop it. The guy shot him, hit him in the spine. So he made it through to the next day, and he was told that he had a complete T9 fracture, would never walk again. And then started doing some physio, and they're like, well, maybe it's not complete, because it's hard to tell with those things if they're a complete or incomplete fracture. Then he was re-diagnosed with an incomplete T9 fracture. So there was a chance that he walks again. It's going to be incredibly challenging. And when he was released from the hospital, he lost all his inpatient care. So he's got no physio for 3 months until he's eligible for outpatient care. So he lost all those benefits. So he reached out to me, we talked, and he's like telling me the same thing. He's like, all I want to do is recover. Like it's all I need. Like I just need the time and the resources to do it. And like, I'll give it everything I have. And he's been doing that. We're lucky to get him in. We pay for 2 physio sessions a week for him at a neuro physio specialist. And then he's got 2 sessions a week that are covered by OHIP. The disparity in care is tremendous. Basically what he said is at the OHIP, like the outpatient care, they see him as a low likelihood for getting back to good health. So they don't give him the same sense of treatment. If he misses appointments, they just cancel them for the month. I think he was saying, like, it's ridiculous the way that they structure it, but it's because everyone has these benefits, right? So whenever you go through an elective surgery, you're given X amount of physio sessions. So I had a friend who had
Right.
a dislocated shoulder, got a surgery for it, and he was entitled to $400 in physio, which is like a month's worth of sessions. So everybody gets it. So the system is so clogged with all of these
Right.
cases that are typical cases that the people like Gavin fall through the cracks a little bit just
Right.
because it's overflowed. If his physio goes on vacation, he doesn't get a replacement physio. He just misses the session. All of
Yeah.
these kind of things start to compound, and I don't have the capacity to change the system. It's totally out of my control. But if it wasn't for our resources, he also doesn't get the same really quality of care there, because to him, I think he's more of like a number to them, whereas in private care, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's a little different. And again, I'm not ragging on the people who are giving care to him, because I'm sure it's incredibly challenging to go through the amount of cases they do in a day.
Yeah.
But it's just different. So it's unfortunate to see, but I know how motivated he is. And I guess the long-winded kind of point to that is seeing same sort of thing, like you said, seeing how much he is willing to give to that pursuit of getting back. I understand it to a small degree, because there was a point where I wasn't sure I was going to walk again, and almost all of my day, every day for almost like a year and a half. Like I quit my job when insurance told me I had to go back to work, and spent all of my savings just trying to focus on my rehab. But seeing how hard he is working right now to get back, and seeing how the system's failing him a little bit, it motivates me like nothing else.
Yeah,
Like nothing
yeah.
else I could even explain. And I think it's tremendous to see the resilience of some of these people who go through these situations. Like I'd like to hope that the three of us as well, because it's remarkable what you can do when you go through hardship and you
Yeah,
start to lose
absolutely.
those fears to really pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Is that what really triggered you wanting to start the charity?
So we worked with another grantee before, but the charity, that idea came to fruition pretty quickly into my recovery. Like I want to say the idea came up like within the first week in the hospital.
Wow.
It was super quick, and it was because I wanted to do something that mattered out of everything that I went through. It didn't actually start really making any traction. Like we incorporated it, I think, in September or October that year. And then we really didn't start pushing it until the spring. For me, it was I had access to all these resources, right? Like I
Yeah.
had constant physio, and even if someone had 3/5 of that treatment, they'd be able to recover so much better. And I was able to see it firsthand and realize how difficult it is for these individuals to get that quality of care. Because for me, it was a nightmare. Like I didn't,
Yeah.
I had to fight insurance tooth and nail. Like insurance really doesn't want to pay for anything. And I'm talking like, I'm like making up shit so that they cover more things. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I can't go back to work. My doctor gave me a note to be off until December, which like at first, like to me, December seemed like a really long time. So I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's 6 months. But then you put it in perspective. It's like, man, like this injury took me like 2 years to recover from. Like I'm still, or maybe I'd say it took me about a year to fully recover from. And that was like 5 hour a day physiotherapy, right?
Yeah.
So that should have taken even longer. But they were pushing me to be back in December to stop covering my physio benefit, and then to sit me at a desk for 8 hours a day. And I'm telling them everything. I'm like, I don't have a car, and I live an hour away from the office, and I can't take public transport because I can't stand up. Like just all these things. And they're like,
Yeah.
they're finding ways around it. They're just, instead of paying for the care. So I saw how little I think the system actually cares about the well-being of the trauma survivors, and how it's more of they have their bottom line to meet. That's what they care about.
Yeah.
And granted, not all insurance companies are like that. Like I've spoken to some amazing, incredible people in the insurance space who truly do care a little bit more than the major corporation that my company was using. But I know that too many people are falling through the cracks the way that I did, and too many people aren't getting that same level of care. So when I actually started the charity, it was threefold that we wanted to do. And the first is to work with physiotherapy. So like the physical rehab, right? What I was talking about. The second and the third I tied, where we wanted to focus on the psychotherapy aspect, where we got the resources for trauma survivors to talk to the right people, but also create a network of survivors who've been through the same sort of thing to mentor people through it. So
Yeah.
Gavin now, like I've got him in contact with quite a few people, but some people who are more like in the wheelchair space, right? Who've been through hardships that he's been through. And now he's at a point where he's starting to grasp it a little more. He wants to pass that forward to other people. And that's what we've been able to successfully do as well, which is just connect people to give them that kind of like mentor, like I had, that I said that was so incredibly important to me. So there was a lot of reasons really for it. I think at the core, it might sound a little selfish, but it was to find some purpose in my own situation and really, I think, make the most of the unique competitive advantage. And again, like I don't make any money off the charity. Like
Mhm.
it's,
Yeah.
it was more of a fulfillment thing. But then the more I started to connect with people, the more I realized there was like a desperate need for it. And
Yeah.
it's just not, especially in Ontario, because I think in Calgary, like Alberta, other provinces, sometimes some provinces do have the victims kind of support benefits, and there is more things. In Ontario, we have nothing. So
Wow.
I was lucky enough to have my hospital stay and the surgeries paid for. I didn't have anything else. Like all of the wheelchair I used for the first week at a hospital, it wasn't covered. The crutches weren't covered.
Wow.
The like adjusted living stuff wasn't covered. And again, we're too small. Like I can't really cover that for everybody,
Yeah.
but I want to help out in like the capacities that I can.
Yeah.
So that's like those 4 costs there, like that's like $1,000-$2,000. Like it's a
Wow.
drop in the bucket. But physio costs, you want proper physio, you're looking at for 2 sessions a week, $12,000 to $20,000 a year.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it adds up really quickly. And I saw how that's a lot of money for almost everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I saw an area that really needed some help, and I tried to do my part to make a difference.
Yeah. I keep going back and forth because I'm like, it's great that you've been able to do this and you've been able to start an organization to help other people. But it's also unfortunate that you've had to do this because there are those gaps. We interviewed a girl, Brianna. She was in a car accident and she was in a wheelchair, and it was the same thing. She had to fight for all these things through her insurance company. She's Canadian as well. And then she wanted to be able to walk again. So she had to actually fundraise money because her insurance company wouldn't bring her to this special rehab in order to help her
Yep.
walk again. And it's so frustrating that there are these things available for people, but they have to pay out of pocket or create their own fundraising. So there needs to be more awareness in this space. Any one of us could be in this situation tomorrow. We could get in a car accident or get shot or something like that.
I think if you want to even take it a step further, I think what really disappoints me about stories like these, right, is although they're good clickbait stories, but everyone just kind of writes them off as like an anomaly. It just doesn't
Absolutely.
really happen. So
Yeah.
you have like political leaders and people who have like a vested interest in determining where the taxpayer dollar
Mhm.
goes. They don't really care to spend taxpayer dollars on this sort of stuff because it's not going to impact their votes. It's not going to be something that's overly popular, because although it sounds really nice in theory, there is a lot of other issues out there that more people feel directly emotionally connected to,
Absolutely.
who will rally around it. So that's why, at least in my individual case, I want to try to get as much awareness out there for what's happening, but also bring to light like the incredible need for all of this stuff. And I think that there's a lot of good causes that there is need for out there, but I think this one is right up there, I think, with some of the most important, because everybody that I've talked to going through this, almost everybody, if not everybody, went through these sorts of things at no fault of their own, right? Like they were directly disassociated and then had their lives changed. And you know, that could ruin a lot of people. If you don't have the adequate resources, you're just done. They're not just like one-offs that happen and it's too bad, like that one person's life was ruined, but what are we going to do? Cater to the anomaly? It's not just the anomaly, like it's way more prevalent than you think. And that's a voice that I want to bring to the table and really push for change.
Wow.
That's so scary.
You know what it is, but I think
Yeah.
you also can't live your life in like bubble wrap. I think I've seen a lot of people who go the opposite way, where I'll say there was a point where I was like horrified to walk out my door, right? Like I live like in the downtown core of Ottawa. When I moved out on my own, so I moved back out on my own 2 months after everything, I was like scared to death, like of just leaving my apartment. And that's like, when you're a larger 23-year-old guy, like that, it shouldn't really be as big of a worry for you. Never had been previously in my life.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was horrified. I was at the gym one day and I swear I almost had a panic attack. Like the walls were closing in I can't even really explain it. I was about to have like a full kind of breakdown because I was looking outside and was like assessing every car that I saw drive by, thinking like, is this guy coming to finish me off? Is this guy?
Oh
And
my gosh.
it can be really challenging because eventually you start to realize, okay, it is safe to walk outside. I've walked outside 20 times and I haven't got shot yet. So this is great, right? Like, this is a step in the right direction. And then eventually you walk outside 50 times and then 100 times. And it's okay, you know what? This is fine. And then you start to forget about it.
Yeah.
And that time is really the only true healer. And I did mine a little bit differently too. So I don't know how many of my TikToks you've watched, but I was a bit of a crazy person with that stuff. So like I started going for jogs in the middle of the night. Like I started getting my roommates to like pop balloons around me to simulate gunfire. Like I went like full into the deep end of exposure therapy,
You
which
immersed yourself. Yeah.
for what it's worth, I will recommend to everybody personally. Again, I'm not a doctor. Like this is just my personal unique experience that
Yeah.
worked for me.
I love that.
Absolutely. Wow.
Your outlook is so incredible and so infectious. And I'm so glad that you took what you went through and saw it as a blessing and really repurposed it into changing other people's lives.
Yeah.
It's a gift. If you're ever
Yeah.
fortunate enough to go through a life-altering trauma, no matter how hard they might be, they're tragic. I think, like we talked about, it is something I wish that nobody had to go through.
Yeah.
But if you are, I don't want to say lucky, but lucky enough in a way to have to experience this totally altered state of being and thinking, being able to pull the lessons from it that you can, if you're able to successfully make it through something like this, it's incredible the kind of person that you can become. So I wish that no one had to go through it ever, like any sort of serious traumas. They break my heart to hear a lot of the stories that I do, to be honest.
Absolutely.
But if somebody's got to go through it, there's two ways you can respond. And I think figuring out how to find the lessons and the benefit of it is the only way, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, hey, thank you guys for giving me the platform. I always love passing forward some of the lessons that I've learned and sharing my story and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
For anyone listening too, at HTGR Canada is my charity's Instagram page. We don't use it as much as we should, but if you're looking for more content, Peacock_Brandon is my personal Instagram and is my TikTok page as well. TikTok is where we talk most of the charity, the stuff that we're doing a little bit more. And if anyone wants to donate, check out htgrcharity.com. You can also see my stories, my grantee stories that we've worked with on there, and learn a little bit more about all the great things that we do.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
I'll
much
put
for
everything in
sharing
the
that.
show notes and I'll tag you as
Beautiful.
well. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your night. We will talk soon.
I will. Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Carling.
Brandon, thank you so much for being on our
Absolutely.
podcast. It's
Crazy
rare that we
story.
get a man. I don't know that we've had a gunshot story or a gun violence story before.
No, I don't. Not that I can recall.
Yeah, his whole outlook is just so great. And the fact that he's trying to help other survivors of these traumas is so great.
Absolutely. I think we realize this does happen in Canada, but there's not enough awareness and there's not enough support for people who are victims. So it's great that he's getting out the message and we are happy to share it.
Yeah. If you have been thinking this whole episode, man, I need to get more Carling and Michelle, follow us on all of our social medias.
Yes.
We're everywhere. Join our Patreon if you can. It's so much fun and we would love to have you. Leave us a review and, I don't know, tell your friends about us. Download our episodes. All right. I am going to go take some Tylenol because I have a bit of a head cold and I don't feel my best. But then we're going to record a Halloween Patreon episode today, which is so crazy because it's only the beginning of September.
You got to be ahead of the game.
Yeah, we try. All right.
All
we
right.
hope everybody has a great day.
Yes, we do.
A great week.
Yep.
And we will see you guys later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.